Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Ben Coons, and I'm here today to introduce and welcome Robert Shiller, who is visiting as part of the Microsoft Research Visiting Speaker Series. Robert Shiller, as I'm sure many of you know, has predicted the bubbles of our past and has foretold many to come, including the crash of the tech bubble in 2001. Today, Robert Shiller will be discussing his book, The Subprime Solution, and how to get out of this mortgage mess. Robert J. Shiller is the best-selling author of Irrational Exuberance and The New Financial Order, among other books. He is a professor of economics at Yale University. So please join me in welcoming Robert Shiller.
Thank you. Hello. Well, this is supposed to be a book talk, but events have kind of gotten beyond my book. I have a list here of the things that, the publication date for my book was September 1, and I have a list of what's happened. Unfortunately, my book is already outdated in many ways, but events have gotten past us. So my book, publication date, that means when it's out and available for review. Then, less than a week later, the government took over Fannie and Freddie. It was a massive nationalization, effectively, although it says conservatorship, but it's, they have about $4.6 trillion of mortgages that they back, and it's now back to the government. Then, less than 2 weeks after my book came out, Merrill Lynch the announcement came that Merrill Lynch would be sold to the Bank of America. Merrill Lynch, founded in 1914, is our biggest stockbroker company. Venerable, everyone knows them. I have an account there. Maybe some of you have accounts there. Then the next day, Lehman Brothers, founded in 1857, one of our top investment banks, files for bankruptcy. Then there are 5 top investment banks in this country. We already lost Bear Stearns. That was before. That's in the book. Bear Stearns is there. But now Goldman and Morgan Stanley are also fundamentally changed. So we don't have any of the original top 5 in their original form. On September 17th, Treasury bill rate fell to 0. I think I have a plot here. This is the daily 3-month Treasury bill rate, which is an interest rate on a U.S. government security that lasts 3 months. And you can see what it's done since 1951. This is every day, and this is September 17th. It hit 0 for the first time. That's a sign that something is really going on. I wish I could have gotten it into my book, but that's a problem. What this means is, I think, that people, they don't want to be taking risks in this economic environment. So they're going to the safest thing they could possibly find. And the Treasury bill is thought to be the safest thing. You know, the other side of it is that the so-called TED spread hit 500 basis points. The TED spread is the spread between a 3-month LIBOR interest rate and the 3-month Treasury rate. LIBOR has risk in it. It's interbank loans, whereas the Treasury bill rate is thought to have no risk in it. So that was a huge spread. So people were paying 5 percentage points more. They wouldn't be induced to hold these bank loans for just 3 months without a 500 basis point spread. So it's a sign that confidence was falling dramatically. And people began to worry that our capitalist system was locking up. And so we are currently, as you must be reading in the news, Paulson, our Treasury Secretary, and Bernanke, our Fed Chairman, announced the proposal to have the government spend up to $700 billion to buy distressed securities from troubled banks to help prevent a banking crisis like that of the Great Depression. That's not my alarmist talk, that's their alarmist talk, including the President, I think, made some statement like that. So all these things are not in my book, but I think we're interested in why this happened and what to do about it, and that is in the book. It's just gotten all the more dramatic. When I was writing the book, I was wondering how dramatic. I was worried about things like this happening, but I didn't want to be too alarmist. So what did I say? I have to go back and remember, but I didn't predict this particular sequence of events. But I was, actually it goes back to a 2005 book I wrote called the Second Edition of Irrational Exuberance. It seemed to me that something bad might be coming. And so I wanted to talk in this talk about why and why this is happening in my view, and what to do about it. I guess the what to do about it is the more important of the two. When I talk about why, I want to take a behavioral economics perspective. I work at a university, and it seems to me that universities are probably too compartmentalized. They're divided up into departments. There's an agency problem. We take young people, assistant professors, and we tell them, you have to publish in refereed journals or you will be fired. It's a really competitive, I guess you know something about competitive atmosphere, but the unfortunate thing is that it doesn't always provide the right incentives. So people feel that they have to get to the frontier really fast, so they specialize narrowly. And I think this is exactly the kind of phenomenon that can't be understood by narrow specialists. I was just talking to Ray Fair at Yale, who has a computer model for the economy, just a couple months ago. And he said, I don't see what all this alarm is about. My model is predicting nothing is wrong. He was telling me the dollar is cheap, so imports should be coming in. There's nothing, there's nothing happening. And I said, well, I have a suspicion that something not in your model isn't happening. And it's true, is happening. And it is true. His model doesn't have subprime loans in it. His model doesn't have confidence in it. It's not there. The problem is he can't quantify those things. And so it seems to me it may be hard to quantify what's happening. So I want to take a broad perspective, and it seems to me that that's a broad social science perspective. And then I want to use that perspective to inform what we should be doing. I hope social science doesn't turn you off. What I'm saying is I want to think about what's really happening. Okay, so let me start with a little bit of social science. This is the red line here is home prices in the United States from 1890 to the present. Well, that actually ends in the second quarter. This is real home prices and as much as possible for an unchanging home. Homes have gotten larger and better over the last 100 years, more than you realize. There was a lot of really bad houses that are all torn down and gone now. You see some beautiful specimens that remain from 100 years ago, but it gives you a distorted sense about how people lived back then. But if you correct for quality and for the CPI inflation, which has put an uptrend on everything, you can see this series shows what's happening. And the thing immediately to notice is this big up spike. Well, when I first published this series in 2005, we were there. And I said, that looks like a rocket taking off. It doesn't look right to me. And I was right. This rocket has started to fall. And it's quite a dramatic, this is quite a dramatic movement in context of U.S. home prices, right? And we've fallen about halfway back down compared to, we started this in 2007, and we're about halfway back down. This is, I'm working now, the latest numbers in this series are an index that I produced with Carl Case at Wellesley College back in the 1980s, but now it's being produced by Standard & Poor's. So it's called the Standard & Poor Case-Shiller National Home Price Index. And it's an average for the whole country. Many cities, I'm suspecting Seattle as well. We have Seattle. It's up on the S&P website. I should have plotted it. I should have plotted it for you. It's there. I think it shows even more volatility than this. It's one of the glamour cities that are more volatile. But the amazing thing is this is the whole country going through this. And you can see that we're in an unusual situation. There has never been such a big boom before. The one that comes closest is this one in here. That's called the baby boom. That was right after World War II, and the soldiers coming home wanted to have families and live normally, and they wanted a home. But meanwhile, President Roosevelt had shut down the construction industry for the war, except for defense purposes. So if you wanted to build a house during World War II, you had to go to the War Production Board and argue that it was in the national interest to build this house during the war, and that was hard to do. They didn't want materials to be used up. So there was a shortage of homes and a big boom. But something is really different. This is even bigger. And the thing that bothers me is that, all right, you can understand there'd be a boom after World War II. That was just a cataclysmic event. We had, what was it, 25 million men in uniform, and it was like the end of the world in a sense. And when we recovered from that, you might expect something to happen to market prices. But why now? What's this? Why is it happening? And the other thing that is shown on this chart are, in the green line, construction costs, or building costs, population, and long-term interest rates. And it's very clear that nothing particularly has happened to any of those over this period. So it's just home prices went up. And that is a puzzle. So I'm going to argue that it's due to a bubble. And you've heard this before. But it's not something that is agreed upon. It's not something that most of us have a clear understanding of. So that's what I spent time trying to develop in the book. It's really remarkable that home prices didn't go up in real terms in 100 years. We do polls, Case and I do questionnaire surveys of home buyers. We've been doing this for some years. And a lot of people, especially on the West Coast, have this view that homes are going to go up 10% a year. We just asked, what do you think the annual rate of price increase will be for the next 10 years, per year? The median answer is something like 5% a year. But a lot of people say 10% a year. Do you know what would, I don't know if anyone knows what 1.1 to the 110th power is. If home prices went up 10% a year since 1890, they would be astronomical now. So, somebody isn't thinking right. Home prices haven't done much. Now you think of it, it's kind of obvious, because we all are living in these beautiful homes, and they weren't 100 years ago. So it's not like they went out of reach. There's some sort of delusional thinking, I think, as part of the bubble. So if you read things that people were saying in this period, there was this theory that developed very strongly that home prices always go up. I tried, and that it's the best investment. I tried to find when people were saying that at earlier times. And now we live in an electronic age, and you can search newspapers. You can spend all day reading 1890 if you want, or any of those periods. It's all up on, you've got it in your laps right there, I guess. I assume you do. And so what were people saying about bubbles all this time? Well, in this period, I read what people were saying, and there wasn't much talk about housing as a wonderful investment. You know what they were saying? They were saying, better think whether you want to go in now, because the president is committed to expanding the housing stock. The GI Bill was passed by Congress that everyone deserves a home. Just wait a while and the prices will come back down. So that was I found a couple of people saying that homes are a wonderful investment, but not very common. Over all this period, you couldn't even find anything about home prices. They weren't even talking about it. I found, it's actually off the map, I found some nice discussions of home prices from the 1880s. There was a housing boom in Los Angeles and New York. And I found a nice statement somewhere of someone who said, land is fixed, population is growing, the economy is growing, and so home prices should just go up and up. So I found it in 1886, I think it was. Well, a funny thing, I found it during another housing boom. You know, these theories, I think they were latent in our mind, and they don't influence our thinking very much. When home prices aren't going up, you're not going to bring out that theory or talk about it. So you just kind of, it's like a virus, like it's lying in, like the herpes virus lying in your spinal cord, waiting to take control if there's another bubble. But between these times, people didn't generally think that homes were a great investment. So I have a, imagine you go back in a time machine to any one of these years, right, and pick someone and say, I think homes are a wonderful investment, population is growing, prices always go up. What would they say? First of all, they would stare at you in disbelief, and they'd say, I'm guessing, this is my interpretation of what someone back then would say. They'd say, you know, homes are, if you're going to buy a home as an investment, that's a lot of expense, right? And you know, they wear out, and they go out of fashion. What do you mean, invest in a house somewhere? And so I don't think they would have bought it. I can convey the feeling that you might get. If I were to ask you, say, I think investing in automobiles is the best investment, okay? And you should buy them and warehouse them and sell them 20 years later. What would your reaction be? Well, you might think, well, maybe if I buy some kind of collector's car, I guess maybe that's a good idea. But I'm not about to do that. I think that's what they would have said about houses. Now, another thing, in the U.S., going way back, they used to do a lot of land speculation. And I found a remarkable book by Aaron Sokolsky written in the 1930s called The Great American Land Bubble. Written, by the way, just after the housing burst bubble that led to the depression of the 30s. That's when people are interested in. But he said, as a really striking opening line in the book, he said, America, this is the opening line of the book, America is at its root a speculation. And he argues that people came to America in the 1700s and the 1800s to speculate on land because they all knew that this country was going to be populated. You know, hundreds of millions of people were coming here. So what could be better than to come to the U.S.? But what they did is they would buy like 200 acres or 2,000 acres for a shilling an acre or something like that, hoping to make money. George Washington did that sort of thing. But the idea is kind of new now that you can just buy a house practically anywhere. That's the new idea that brought in this boom. Anyway, I'm spending too much time on this slide. This is just, I should have put Seattle on this. I wasn't thinking, but I've got a lot of other cities. And Seattle actually is a little bit less volatile. It's more like Chicago lately. But it is still volatile. All the major cities have gone through booms and collapses recently. This is in real terms. You can see some of them are much more dramatic than the national, like San Francisco. Las Vegas is kind of really interesting. It's kind of hard to see, but it's just going along here doing nothing. And then it's like they came late to the boom. Somehow they got the idea. And it zooms up suddenly and then comes right back down. So I think something psychological is going on with this. The other thing that's interesting is that it's particularly low-priced homes that have shown the biggest price increases. So if you look, we have, it's all on the Standard & Poor website. We have home price indexes for low-priced, middle-priced, and high-priced homes. And you can see they were all tracking more or less together in San Francisco until after 2000. And then the low-priced homes took off much more. And I think this has to do with the subprime lending situation. That subprime, we developed a subprime lending industry that specialized. There were special subprime mortgages. Most people who had good credit would borrow through conventional mortgages, fixed rate, 30-year mortgages, that sort of thing. But we developed a whole special cadre of lenders that specialized in low credit, bad credit risk people, so-called subprime, and they would give them high interest rate or adjustable rate mortgages that would adjust up to a higher rate. And this thing exploded in an unregulated manner. And I think that helped push up this substantial part of the boom. But I think that this is also, this phenomenon is part of the bubble itself. Why did we have lenders who were willing to do this, and why did we have people who were willing to buy securitized mortgages of that nature? They were often no doc or low doc, no documentation mortgages, as well as low credit quality borrowers. I think it's because of the boom. The strange thing that happened is that our national conventional wisdom seemed to be that home prices only go up. And I suppose if you pin someone about it and push them and say, why should they only go up? It doesn't make any, it's contrary to Finance 1. Even if it's true that home prices always go up, it doesn't mean they're a good investment, by the way. Elementary finance says that everything is priced at its present value. And so if something is known that it will always go up, it'll just have a high price to start with. So you end up getting a low dividend yield to offset the high capital gain yield, and it just means nothing. That's obvious. I would give someone a low grade undergraduate who didn't seem to see that. And yet, it seems like our financial titans didn't figure that out. There was just this idea that housing has got to be a great investment. And that it took hold at this time. And so the regulators and everyone else. I tell a story in my book. I was on a panel in front of an audience discussing the situation with Frank Nothaft, who's chief economist at Freddie Mac. This is during the boom. And I asked him about the Freddie Mac. That's one of the two government-sponsored enterprises in mortgages. And I asked him, what would happen if there's a housing crisis, where the housing prices collapse? And he said, in front of an audience, of course he's defensive naturally, in front of an audience, he said, oh, we have very careful stress tests of the Freddie portfolio, and there's nothing to worry about. And then I said, well, what is the biggest home price decline that you've accounted for in your stress tests? And he said, we've gone all the way to a 13.5% price drop. And he said, even we can survive that. And then I said, well, what if it falls by more than 13.5%? And he seemed surprised by that question. And then he said, we've never had a home price drop of that magnitude, at least not since the Great Depression. And I thought that was interesting. That it kind of shamed me out of it. You're not supposed to bring up the D word, because that makes you out as alarmist. So I quieted down. I let him win that one for the time being. But you see, that I think is the fundamental thing that's been happening here. It's not just the U.S. This is This is the Halifax home price index for the UK, and it's deflated by it's also in real terms by what they call the retail prices index. And you can see that the same phenomenon is happening in the UK, and you can find other countries as well. It's really remarkable. There was this boom in the 1980s. And in London, prices came all the way, they kind of doubled and came all the way back down. You kind of wonder how people could think that home prices never fall after we just had this happening in London. Of course, it's another country, but you see it happened in Boston pretty much as well, not quite as dramatic. So it seems to me that this theory that housing is a great investment because the population is always growing is one of those thought viruses that seems to infect people's thinking at times of bubbles, but it just doesn't bear scrutiny. I wanted to compare it with the stock market because this is the Standard & Poor Composite Stock Price Index. And I like to show long perspective. That's one of my biases. That you can't understand what's happening unless you take a long perspective. So this is back to 1871. And you can see that we've had another bubble as well recently. And that is, this is the, you called it the tech bubble, but I call it the Millennium Bubble. That never caught on. I was trying to give it a better name. Because you know when this peak was? Well, in the S&P it was March 2000, right at the end of at the beginning of the new millennium. In the Dow it was January of 2000. So that's a good name for it. It also might be part of the origin of it, that there was a lot of tech talk, excited talk about the future leading up to the millennium. We had this big party, and then this is our hangover right here. But the interesting thing is that something anomalous happened. This is a very big spot. Even if I plotted it on log scale, it comes across as very big. And the only thing that is immediately comparable is the 1920s stock. This is the Roaring 20s. That's 1929 there. And then there's, that's the bottom. And then there was this recovery, this forgotten recovery. After 1932, the stock market tripled again. And people, it's puzzling because it was during the Great Depression. The unemployment rate was still like 15%. And yet the stock market was booming and there was a sense that we're moving forward again. But then it just crumbled and collapsed. And you can see the stock market never recovered until well after World War II. So it's kind of similar movement, right? We had another boom and collapse. I keep thinking that there's some bubble thinking underlying all of this. Just to show you that it's international, this is the Sensex index in India in real terms also. And you can see what amazing things have been happening lately. The Indian stock market went up 5-fold in real terms between 2003 and 2005, and it came down 30%. So the world is kind of in a post-bubble mode lately. This is the Shanghai Composite stock price index. And it also went up 5-fold between, 2005 and 2000 and, what is that, 7, I guess. And it's down 2/3. This is another, like the 1929 boom and crash. Actually, it boomed up much quicker in China. So there's something in our culture that I think is driving. And what I said in my other book, Irrational Exuberance, is that bubbles are phenomena that have definite causes. Something has to start them. There's a precipitating factor, usually multiple factors that give people a sense of a new era or something exciting coming. And we can talk at great length about them, but they're hard to pin down because there's typically too many of them. But the central thing is amplification mechanisms, that there's a feedback. And you can think of it as a social epidemic. Ideas spread like diseases. But you can think of it as just people responding to price increases. When prices go up, it gets everyone's attention. And stories start spreading about people who made a lot of money. And that those stories are amusing and fun. And we all want to sort of participate. And as more and more people come in to participate, they bid prices more and more up. And it becomes a self-reinforcing thing for a while, but it can't go on forever. I also like to emphasize that it's not just simple extrapolation, but that the bubble changes our whole culture. That people start to think that we live in a different world. As it changes their idea of who they are. They tend to think of themselves as investors more. Rather than responsible or hardworking, I'm foresighted and an investor. And I think we've seen a change over much of the world in who we admire and what we want to be, and that may change again if we have a major correction. And psychological factors is the human empathy. We tend to feel the same emotions as others. And when you see other people showing excitement, or you just see other people paying attention to something, there's a social basis to attention. And if everybody else is talking about real estate, you can't insulate yourself from it except to move to an abandoned island or something. That's real estate, by the way. You have to buy a place. And so it's a complex phenomenon. That's why I worry about the unwinding of this phenomenon, that it can have strong cultural and psychological effects on the way down. So I'm going to get to my solutions. So the theme that I have is that we are at a crisis of confidence now. The capitalist system is built on confidence. And we have to react to this situation in a constructive way to maintain confidence. Well, one of the themes of the book is that the Great Depression of the 1930s was an international phenomenon. Every country of the world had some part in it. Among the different countries of the world, I think the U.S. stands out in having a very good, constructive response to that. We have to thank President Roosevelt for, maybe it was a political move, but it was the right thing to do. He announced what he called the New Deal. And in the first 100 days after taking office in 1933, he instituted a lot of reforms. And these were reforms that were designed to make the system work better. Notably, for example, they created the Securities and Exchange Commission, which was a regulator that was regulating our financial markets. And to business people, it looked very left-leaning and contrary to American free enterprise But in fact, it was an institution that tried to make financial markets work. And since then, it's been copied all over the world. The SEC is a prototype for similar organizations in every country. But they also created the Homeowners Loan Corporation, Federal Housing Administration, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, Fannie Mae, that took later, that was 1938, and so on. So that's the kind of thing that I think we have to do again. The Depression could have been a lot worse, and it was a lot worse in other countries in the sense that we had World War II. I think that the anger and hostility that was generated by the Depression was one of the factors that led to World War II. World War II did not start in the United States. And so I know I'm being very loose in my causal arguments, but I think that we have to try to think carefully about maintaining a good set of confidence in our economic institutions so that people can work constructively and creatively, thinking that it's all right here. And so in the short run, I think that we need bailouts. And that's why it's in my book, but even before. But now that we're talking about bailouts, I have to say I support them because of the effect of a collapse of our system could be very enduring. So one aspect is to bail out individual homeowners who got into mortgages that they can't afford. The Housing and Economic Recovery Act of earlier this year arranged for funding that would pay for at least as much as 400,000 homeowners. That might not be enough. John McCain agrees with me that's not enough because he's proposing to do even more. Obama hasn't said, but I presume he likely will too. And then the 700 billion bailout is to be bailing out banks and lending institutions. And that's different. That's not focused on individuals, but it's focused on the institutions. That's not actually mentioned in my book. But I think maybe it's necessary because of the signs of collapse that we're seeing now. And we need to do that in order to keep the infrastructure going. It was a theme of Ben Bernanke's book, Essays on the Great Depression, that one reason the Depression was as bad as it was is that it destroyed our financial infrastructure. We had all these institutions that were expert at allocating capital, and they were severely compromised and unable to function. And that hurts capitalism. So that's the kind of risk that we have now. So those are I regard everything we're talking about today seems to be short-run solutions. That's partly because we're having an election now. We're going to have a new president and a new Congress. And so these are the kind of things that would be in the first 100 days of the new Congress. So I wrote the book thinking that maybe I can have some influence on what we do going forward. And what's really important is the long-run solution. So the institutions that were created in the 1930s to respond to the Great Depression are still with us today. We're still living on autopilot that was designed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We still have the FHA, we still have Fannie Mae, we still have FDIC. These were all invented in prior financial crises. We also have the Federal Home Loan Bank System. That was Herbert Hoover's administration. Still functioning, and it's working to help reduce the severity of this crisis. Even going further back, we still have something called the Federal Reserve. Do you know the history of that? It was created, there was a terrible financial panic in 1907, and people said, we have to fix this. But it took them long. There's a lot of arguing and recriminations, and they couldn't seem to get it together. But in 1913, another financial crisis seemed to be looming. So Congress, in a spirit of speed and haste, they created the Federal Reserve. It was a financial crisis that spurred them to do it. We don't seem to do these things in normal times. So now we have a financial crisis. So our mode of thinking should be, let's set up institutions that will deal with this and the next crisis and the one after that. This is the time to do it when we have a mandate to do it. So I have long-run solutions, which are more important, I think, than the short-run solutions. And they have three parts. A new information infrastructure, that's this slide. But then also, the next slide will be a broader financial markets. And after that, better retail institutions. And so this list looks different than Nouriel Roubini's list or other people who are proposing solutions, because it's more thinking about expanding and broadening the strength of our financial institutions. So I don't know if I can cover all these things. Let me just maybe emphasize the first one. The problem we had is partly because people were not being given good financial advice. Why do we have all these people borrowing adjustable rate mortgages, which we kind of knew were going to adjust up because interest rates were abnormally low, short rates, at the time they were issued. And we were putting low-income people in. We started adjusting up the loan-to-value ratios, or the standards, on how much someone could borrow out of their income. It used to be you couldn't borrow more than 2.5 years' income, and that went up to 5 or 8 or something. So, what was happening, part of the problem is that people weren't being told that you shouldn't do this. Most people who were more educated and more higher income weren't borrowing at these adjustable rates. They were borrowing with conventional mortgages. So you ask, well, why didn't these people get the word? Well, I think it's because they didn't have anyone advising them, except salespeople. So you were dealing with real estate. And salespeople often, because of their own internal sense of personal integrity, told them the right thing. But you got to understand that when people are given an economic incentive to do otherwise, some of them are going to do otherwise. So a real estate agent, how often do they tell a home buyer that, maybe you shouldn't be buying a house now. Why don't you just rent? And then, some of them did that, I think. Or they might consider a mortgage broker who would tell a mortgage client, you really shouldn't be taking out an adjustable rate mortgage. Many of these mortgage brokers got commissions for steering you toward. And in fact, we know that some lenders told their mortgage brokers, put them in a subprime if you can, even though they might qualify for a conventional. And they get a special bonus if they did that. See, that's terrible. And what we need, I think, is financial advice that's honest. And how do we get that? Well, my proposal is that we subsidize fee-only financial advisors. We already have, there's something called NAPFA, National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, and they have a website, and I don't have any connection with them, so I guess I can advertise them. But everyone who signs on with them signs a statement that I will not accept any commissions or fees to steer clients toward anything, and moreover, I will charge an hourly fee, and that's it. And unfortunately, they're not very big, because I've talked to these people that the kind of people who really need them have trouble affording their fees, so it just doesn't work out well. So we can subsidize it. We already do subsidize financial advice. It's tax deductible. This is classic. Who is it that's going to take a deduction for financial advice? Well, it's only people who itemize. And these subprime people almost never itemize, right? So it has to be done. If we're going to subsidize it, we have to subsidize it so that it works for these people. We already subsidize medical advice, and it's commonly accepted that, well, these people should have medical advice. I think we should have learned that they need financial advice as well. Rich people know that they need financial advice as well as medical advice. So why don't we accept that that's important? So I won't cover all these others right now, but that's an example. I want that people get the... we're going to have questions at the end. Is this a clarifying? Okay, well, I'll come to you in a minute. Then long-run solutions. Second part, we need to expand our financial markets. And this is going to be more controversial, but it's something that would not be mentioned by most people looking at the crisis. But I would, because I've been working on this for 20 years, trying to get expansion of markets. The subprime crisis is a failure to manage risks. And that means people allowed themselves to be exposed to certain risks, notably real estate risks, in irregular ways. Individuals were holding homes in one city, leveraged, 90% leveraged, their life savings. That's just incredible. I don't know how this got to be the conventional wisdom, that this is what people should do. But that's what they were doing. But it's also institutions like Fannie and Freddie. They were not hedged against real estate risk. I went to Fannie Mae in 2003, and I talked to their economists, some of their economists, and tried to argue that they should be hedging. But their response was, well, I don't know if I got a good answer. It's hard to get people's attention. Probably they didn't think there was any real estate risk. That's part of the problem. But on top of that, they said, well, there's no way to do it anyway. There's no market for these things. So I took it as a challenge. We have to start a market for real estate. And we thought it was a big success when we convinced my colleagues at my company, Macro Markets. It sounds a little bit like Microsoft, doesn't it? Macro Markets, Microsoft. I don't know what we were thinking when we named the company. But anyway, our company managed to get the Chicago Mercantile Exchange to create futures markets for 10 U.S. cities. And it was launched in May of 2006. And we thought this would be terrific because this is the most exciting market of them all. And now we have a liquid futures market. They created options markets as well at the same time. But they didn't take off. And it's one of those mysteries of human behavior. Why would it be that pork bellies are doing this exciting, a lot of volume of trade, and real estate doesn't? It doesn't seem to take off. It has something to do, I wrote a paper about this. Again,
it's not a question, it's more like just a quick comment. Maybe it's because real estate is not such a liquid market and it's hard for market makers to hedge their risk.
It's not as liquid and it's hard for market. Yes, you're absolutely right. We have market makers, and I've talked to them about market makers in the futures market. Right. Everyone wants there to be another market that they can play off against, and that is a problem with these futures.
Hedge real estate risk on the outside. It's hard.
That's right. So it's the same problem that they have in the weather futures. This is what CME people said to me about it. Well, that's a problem, but we can get past it because how do you hedge if you're dealing in weather futures, which are starting to grow? Hurricanes, earthquakes and other things are starting to grow as in futures context, and you can't do it there either. But maybe they're not as big as they would be. I don't know what this audience is. I'm sorry, I cut people off. I'm almost done, so we can have questions in a minute. I don't know your culture here very well. This is in university, my department, they just interrupt speakers all the time, mercilessly. So maybe that's what you would do if I... but I'm almost done, so we can do this in an orderly way. There's other things. So anyway, we tried creating futures markets in real estate. We're trying again. We have a registration in with the SEC to create real estate securities. And I hope to launch these. We hope to launch these. They'll be on single-family homes again. I don't know if this will work, but we're launching these this fall. But I'm not supposed to talk about it because we're in registration, and the SEC has rules which we have to follow. But anyway, there's other things that I think should have markets, incomes and GDP. Oh, Trills is my Canadian colleague, Mark Kamstra, wants the Canadian government to issue shares in its GDP. And he wants to call them Trills because they would be $1.50 a year. That's 1/trillionth of an annual GDP. That would be the dividend. And I'm all for it. I'm actually going to Canada and try to sell their government on that. Not that I have any influence with the Canadian government, but I look forward to the day when you can buy 1/trillionth of the Canadian economy, and I'll be up there to buy them when they're available. The final thing is we need new retail risk management institutions. And I'm just going to talk about the first one, because I also wrote about this in the New York Times. I have a column there that came out a little over a week ago. I have something called the continuous workout mortgage, which I think is a better user-friendly mortgage contract. That it has the following. Right now, we have a system that when you buy a house, you borrow money, you sign a mortgage contract. The mortgage contract doesn't say anything about this workout that you might get that might reduce your debt if you can't pay. That's left to judgment and decision later. The problem with that is that with a conventional mortgage or a subprime mortgage, the way we let things go is that the mortgage is totally rigid and unresponding to any needs of the borrower until the borrower gives up and says, I can't pay. And so the borrower comes back and says, what are you going to do? I can't pay this. And the mortgage lender has a choice. They can say, okay, we've decided, you're out. We're going to throw you out of the house. They do this all the time now. Or the mortgage lender can go back and say, do we want to give this guy a break or not? And then in their private consultations in the next room, they say, well, you know, if we foreclose on this guy, then we get that house. And that's a declining neighborhood. We're going to be stuck with that. Anyway, this guy's going to sue us, and it's going to be legal costs, and we won't be able to get him out for a while. So why don't we just give him a break? That's the system we have. And so the guy gets a reduction in the mortgage balance. But if that's what and now Congress is providing funds to make that happen more after the fact. There's a moral hazard here because it rewards people who don't pay as opposed to people who have high integrity. It discourages people in investing in mortgages because I don't know what Congress is going to do. They might, in fact, they are hurting the investors. Well, it's hard to say in a sense. But why don't we write it into the mortgage contract initially, what will be done in a workout situation? So my proposal, and it should be done continuously, you don't have to ask for it. It would be given to you. So the idea is that if home prices fall, your mortgage payment and balance automatically go down so that you maintain some equity in your house. Right now, we have about 10 million U.S. homeowners with negative equity. That means their home is worth less than their mortgage. And if they sell the house, they won't have enough proceeds from the sale to pay off their mortgage. So these people don't want to move, and they're kind of stuck where they are, and it kind of harms their sense of confidence and outlook. So let's leave people with equity all the time. Their balance automatically goes down. If their city goes down, I don't want to create a moral hazard problem, so we base it on the city, or a neighborhood possibly. Also that it depends on the economic situation. If the unemployment rate goes up, the kind of thing that might spur Congress to take action, then automatically your mortgage payment is reduced. Now you might ask, well, how can mortgage institutions offer such a contract because it puts them at risk? Well, I have these markets, and so we want to expand our markets, and then they can hedge the risk of doing this. So the beauty of the continuous workout mortgages is that there's no crisis. I think that the kind of crises that people are going through now with foreclosures are causing lasting scars. If you are actually losing your job and losing your house, that creates such family stress. It creates marital problems. It creates the children know what's going on. The children are bothered and upset. And it just destroys confidence, I think. There's no reason to let this happen. With this kind of institution, no one has to go begging for a workout. It's just automatic. And it's not involving the government even. The government only has to get involved in a regulatory framework or in a way of encouraging these as defaults. And then we would have a situation that would handle the problem better. I consider these continuous workout mortgages as just an application of elementary principles of finance rather than tradition in financial contract. Finance says you should hedge your risk. So doing something like this is analogous to having a mortgage and also having some kind of swap or financial agreement that manages the risk. And I have other examples of home equity insurance and livelihood insurance. I think that's all my slides. So I'm just going to conclude with just the thought that, repeating myself a little bit, that this is a time to think about long-run improvements in our financial institutions. Well, since I'm at Microsoft, I should also mention that we have a whole new technology, electronic technology, and yet we're still, we're not really relying on that very much for our methods of dealing with crises like this. So I think it's time for people to think creatively about how some of these solutions that I talk about, or analogous ones, can be promoted by better financial technology. So, I mean, I talked about financial advice. When I was saying subsidized financial advice, I didn't say it here, but we're trying to get these financial websites going that give people financial advice. Unfortunately, my impression is that they're not wildly successful yet. And so, but with a subsidy, maybe they would. And I'm thinking of maybe having some kind of financial website connected with personal advice. I think that it's a little bit like people will never want to rely on any website for medical advice. You want to talk to your doctor. So, but there might be some kind of amalgam. I'm just saying that in respect for my audience. I think that the electronic technology ought to be ought to be causing more innovations in our finance institutions, our core finance institutions, than it has. And we're still left with New Deal. It's really the New Deal that we're still living in, basically. We haven't had a major revolution since then. All right, so now, did I finish your...
Well, you mentioned the idea of insurance, so the homeowners are always left with some equity in their house, no matter what happens. And you're saying that the banks should be able to hedge their risk by buying, trading in futures markets in these housing indices. But what I was saying is that there is no liquid market in which, I mean, the thing is all that does is it transfers risk. It doesn't eliminate it, right? So the risk, someone has to take the risk.
But,
and the reason why there's say a stock or a commodities futures market is because that market makers can easily dynamically hedge their risk by shorting the underlying assets. You can't do that with houses. And the thing is, even with stocks nowadays, the government has come out one day and say no more naked short selling. That screws the market makers, which is like you now have regulatory risk. So without market makers, you won't have a market, right? So
all right, So you're raising some valid questions. Maybe I've already sort of answered it. I think that these markets can still function. There are examples. I mentioned the weather futures. But the fact is that there's a reason why you can't short housing. And that is, it's not any government law, nothing about that. It's that it's not fungible. One house is not the same as another. And so you wouldn't sell a house and hope to buy it back later, because you'd have to buy the same house back later and someone could hold you hostage. So there's a fundamental problem. But we're trying to create fungibility, at least in contracts. And even though you can't short houses, I think it does work as a market to help. If a lot of people sell on the futures market, that will help bring down prices. That's one thing that I thought might hedge the bubble. Foreigners who didn't believe in the U.S. bubble could short in the futures market, and that does help provide information, and it also provides an incentive to bring home prices down. But there's a lot of technical finance questions that you have that maybe I can't. Now, you had a question that I stopped you on. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, so actually two. One is around the premise that people weren't given the proper training or information when they signed the loans that maybe they should not have signed. If their underlying assumption is the value of the house will go up, and everyone in the community believes it except for a few economists in education, and the information availability was no different when they signed that loan as it is today. I mean, going back and looking at the history of housing values over time. But if the entire market believed in the same premise, the fact that you're given information, I don't know that that would change your action.
Right.
So that's one question. And a second one is when you talk about the workout mortgages, what's the analogy when the market spikes up? Are your mortgages then uplifted?
Right.
And so where's the balance there?
But answer your second question, I think that your mortgage balance might be uplifted. It's a question of what the market would bear. But that's like the difference between a future and an option. That in a futures market, in an option you got to pay money up front for the protection on the down, if you buy a put option, but then you don't get penalized if it goes up. But with a futures, you don't put up much money at the beginning, just margin, and then of course you get hit if it goes up. And so that might be a problem if people don't like that, but I can see that as a good design.
But it goes to the other point where right now everyone's saying everything's going down, going down, going down. Let's work out those issues in a down market.
Right.
Knowing that we'll probably have an up market and another, I don't know how many.
Well, we do have a problem with human nature, and that people are not perfect. And this is something that in engineering schools they call it human factors engineering. So we need human factors financial engineering. And it is true that there is herd-like behavior. I think that having a market does help reduce herd-like behavior. There's some thing about putting your money where your mouth is. I'm thinking of our own futures market that ever since we founded it, almost from the beginning in May of 2006, it's been in backwardation. That means the futures market, although it's small, has been predicting home price declines. Even back in 2006 when there wasn't this national sense of declining markets. And so I think that you have to distinguish between cheap talk and markets. You have lots of people who will get up on CNBC and say that the housing market is, the fundamentals are strong in the housing market. NAR, this wasn't so cheap talk. The National Association of Realtors announced at the beginning, when was it? It was the beginning of, sometime late last year, I think. They announced an ad campaign, and they put it right up on their website. They didn't call it an ad campaign, they called it a public awareness campaign, where they said now is the best time to buy a house. And they put in, I think they announced it was like $45 million. They had television shows, billboards. They had signs up at bus stops about how good it, and I think they suspended the program because of hostile public reaction, because they were telling people this at the time of the greatest, some of the greatest price declines. And it was just, they fired their chief economist, David Leray, too, who wrote a book called Are You Missing Out on the Home Price Boom? Then he wrote, what was his other book? He wrote another book with the title Why the Real Estate Market Will Not Fall. So he was ousted. But that's cheap talk, and I think markets help a little bit. The other thing I thought your question suggested is, would financial advisors have reduced risks, reduced this kind of borrowing, if financial advisors were caught up in the bubble as well? And I think that's a good point, because I think a lot of financial advisors would not have corrected that misjudgment. But there are other associated misjudgments that I think financial advisors knew about pretty well. One of them is that, and I think you can find this in advice books, but just most people are not getting this advice. One of them is don't trust adjustable rate mortgages because they're going to go up on you. And I don't think people understood. People who don't follow the federal funds rate was at 1% in around 2003 or so. And you know it's going to go up. So you know it's going to reset up. But people who they don't even know what the Federal Reserve is. They can't figure that out. Advisors were telling people that during this housing boom. And the other thing that advisors who were very good with the public were saying is, don't trust the mortgage lender for the judgment on how much you can borrow. A lot of people would go to a mortgage lender and say, can I get a mortgage on this house? And if the mortgage lender said, okay, you qualify, they thought, well, this expert is telling me that I can afford this mortgage. And some advisors were telling people back then, don't use your own judgment and do some calculations. And that's exactly the kind of thing that a good financial advisor would plausibly have done during the housing boom. And so it would have at least reduced it. So I don't know who to answer. Yes, you. Todd.
Yes. I had the good fortune right out of college, this is 1987, to move to Tokyo.
Tokyo, yeah.
And I lived there for 7 years.
Speak up, I think, louder.
I saw the bubble emerge and land prices in Tokyo.
Yeah, there was a huge bubble.
The human dynamics that supported it. And then I experienced the collapse. And it lasted a long, long time. It was purely psychological.
The Japanese home price decline lasted 15 years, 15 consecutive years, from 1991 to 2006.
Yeah. And so my biggest takeaway was that there was a point of psychological exhaustion that took that long. And it wasn't until that exhaustion occurred that the economy began to stabilize and the economy grew and prices began to grow up in the stock market and the prices.
Right.
So that experience led me to do a great deal of research, including your books. And then I read Charles McKay.
Talk louder if you can.
I read Charles McKay.
Charles McKay, yeah.
The Madness of Crowds. And this is something that's been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're at this period right now where we've had this global prosperity boom for a long period of time, where we've had this supportive psychology of
right.
optimism. My concern is that we're in a long period of decline,
right.
and there's going to be this pessimism that begins to take root.
Yeah,
so I was hoping for you to describe, am I onto something, or?
I don't know if you all heard, Todd here lived in Japan during the boom and bust, the beginning of the bust. There was a remarkable Japanese housing boom in the late 1980s. Japan became the laughingstock of the world. I tried to track it down, sometime in the mid-80s, a story surfaced, which you probably heard, which was that the land under the Imperial Palace in Tokyo is worth more than the entire state of California. Did you hear that story? I don't know who. I don't know exactly when it first appeared, but I found it back in '86, I think. But the Japanese finally came around to that view themselves, that something was wrong. It took them a long time. Now, Ben Bernanke thinks that the reason the Japanese debacle was so painfully slow is that the Japanese government didn't fix the problem with the banks, and the banks held bad loans on their book, which clouded their operations for indefinitely, that the Japanese would never face up to that. So that's the assumption. Bernanke has a view, and we're working on the assumption that we want to clear off the bad loans off the bank's books, and we're working on the assumption that that is the proper explanation for the Japanese problem. But I'm worried that that's just one interpretation, and that, as you were saying, that what was happening in Japan was a gradual decline in optimism. And it seems to me that there is something that is not so well understood about what goes on in boom and bust periods. One of them is that I remember talking to a stockbroker, and I've later heard this amplified, after a major market drop, after the 2000 drop. He said, I can tell there's a difference in the tone of voice of my clients. During the 1990 stock market bubble, they were arrogant and they treated me brusquely. Many of my clients, they would call up and their attitude would be, look, I'm in a hurry, I want to make a good investment. After the debacle, they seemed to be chastened, and they would come to him humbly, and there's a mood change that goes on. And so it seems like in the 1980s, and I've had Japanese people tell me that Japan felt like they were the king of the world. And they had high prestige. It was, isn't that right? I mean, we all thought that they were taking over all of our industry. Everything fails when the Japanese win. That was overconfidence, and it led to these huge booms, and then they're corrected. So, fixing the banks isn't going to change these basic views about ourselves and our lives that seem to correlate. So I don't know who to go to next. Yes?
It seems to me that your analysis showing that in normal times housing isn't a good investment actually misses the fact that not because the underlying asset, the house, actually gains in real value, but the economic infrastructure around it has been such that even in normal times, housing has been a good investment for the average person, because you were showing CGI deflated prices, but the way that inflation together with mortgage loans together with the subsidies for getting mortgages act together so that even in the times over, say, from the end of the post-war run-up in housing prices till the start of the current boom, the average homeowner buying a house with a conventional mortgage did see a real increase in wealth as a result of it from the structure of the system around buying homes.
Yeah, I think that I didn't mean to say that housing is not a good investment. I actually own 2 houses myself. Throughout this, I have a home and I have a vacation home. So, but I think that you're also pointing out that the tax system subsidizes home ownership, and that's correct. And so I also think it's good to encourage home ownership, because people who are homeowners have a different sense of belonging. They feel more, especially immigrants or minorities, they feel much more American when they own a home than when they are dealing with a landlord who could kick them out, or they feel like they're under someone's thumb. So I'm actually in favor. I was just speaking at Fannie Mae, and I told them, you have an important mission.
I'm arguing that it really is a good financial investment, or at least in normal times it has been.
Within limits, but not to buy 2 or 3 of them.
Right.
I mean, because...
I'm actually only talking about buying your own home to live in.
Yeah, I actually think, although you might think about timing, but in general, I think it is a good idea to own your own home. I wasn't questioning. That's partly because of the dividend. But the dividend on a home is not paid in dollars, it's paid in services. And so you have to judge your own self whether you want those services. And so if you are single and likely to move soon, it's not a smart move to buy a house. But if you have a family with children and you're thinking about having a stable community and a local school, then that dividend is worth more to you. It's paid in kind. So it's not like other investments. And you don't want to just double it up and increase it. You might want to live in a modest home. One thing that happened during this cultural change is that we started to feel that our social status is connected with homes, or our children's welfare is very much affected by what kind of neighborhood we live in, because it kind of establishes their social status and who they play with and how they view themselves. All these things are involved in the investment. But I didn't mean to criticize an investment in a first home. I'm absolutely not. I'm not saying that it's not a good investment. And maybe I should, yeah.
Let me just interrupt. We'll take 2 more questions and then Victor.
I don't know how to select.
Book signing, so.
How do I select 2? Oh,
So I mentioned a question. Maybe we'll try and keep it, I guess, to a short one. But it seems like, in quick summary, the concern, that's in relation to the bailout plan, the biggest concern is that the credit markets have kind of seized up and, due to the devaluing of all these assets based off of homes. It seems like a lot of the incentive is that, the reason why we have to kind of step in now is because without the credit markets, the economy is going to fail because a lot of, companies rely on getting short-term loans. And additionally, kind of the second problem of consumers not being able to pay for their mortgages, as a result, they scale back their consumption in other areas and affect the economy. What are your thoughts in terms of the trade-offs between either directly addressing the credit markets, which is kind of the track that we're going on now, versus something that gets more to the root of the problem, which is the reason why all these companies now have these devalued assets is because there's a high risk of default in the future and counterparty risk not getting actually paid back for it. Why not take the solution of more directly either spending the same amount of, $750 billion to either reduce interest payments, purchase portions of home, maybe government buys 5% of everyone's home, and as a result, then the sale still gets the upside to it.
All right, so that's a very interesting question. And by the way, I'm not going to, I don't know if you all heard that, but right now we're partly bailing out homeowners and partly bailing out banks. So we could just announce forcefully, we're going to spend $700 billion on bailing out homeowners. And then the idea is that would immediately boost the prices in the subprime mortgage market, and that might immediately relieve the problem. And so that is an interesting idea, and I don't know the answer. I have to say, I'm not Henry Paulson, and I was judging his proposal from the aspect of either that or nothing, and I would say definitely that. I can imagine a reason, but I'm not confident of the answer, that the idea that the banking system is in immediate crisis, and you're getting at it in a more indirect way, and it might not be fast enough in its effect. It might not be believed, whereas funneling cash directly into banks is much more immediate. So it's a little bit like you're proposing that we have a patient who's dying of some disease and we give him a vitamin shot instead of an antibiotic. I'm not saying that I know that you're wrong. And it strikes me as that this is all moving so fast. We haven't, there hasn't been enough discussion yet.
I would disagree with the analogy about the vitamin shot, only that it's the expectation that at some point in 8 months this patient will die of some terminal disease. Therefore, we're now partly pricing it in. However, if we can immediately change that expectation, we should get the immediate pricing in. So it's not that.
Yeah, it's not like a vitamin. That analogy.
Today, so that 8 months from now they don't die.
If you tell the patient that you're giving him a vitamin shot, his mood immediately improves, and he's able to fight off the. That improve your mood? So I don't know, way over there. Yeah.
I love the idea of the insurance policy. I'm just worried about the mechanics. So normally, I'm worried insurance is for uncorrelated risks. So if you have a fire and I have a fire, those are probably uncorrelated. But correlated risks, like say earthquakes, are harder to insure.
Or global real estate crisis.
It's like a global earthquake.
Right.
How do you do the mechanics?
Yeah, it's a very important point. We can't make it go away if it's affecting the whole planet. The only thing we can do is share it better. And that means that it would be spread a little bit. If it was anything that affects, this is basic finance 1, if it's taught properly anyway. Anything, all that finance is about is spreading risks. And if everybody is equally exposed to a risk, if it's a planet-wide thing, if we're worrying about an asteroid hitting the planet, then there's nothing finance can do. But usually things aren't spread equally. So even an asteroid, I think we should have some asteroid insurance policies because it's going to hit one side of the Earth or the other, right? And so the people on the other side of the Earth ought to have some plan in place to help the people who were more directly. If you're right under it, you're probably dead. But if you're nearby, and so. But that's the way finance works, right? And we can rely on charity. What do you think if an asteroid hit the Earth? How much charity would there be from the unstruck side to the struck side? There'd be some help, but it wouldn't. We really wouldn't be sharing on a massive scale. So, so I think that you're absolutely right in principle. It diminishes the power of this, but I think there still is power. And also just having markets underlying these things, observing the rates and having markets is going to improve information about. So I think maybe I should stop.
Great. So with that, I know there's lots of great questions, but we're going to, in respect for Dr. Shiller's time, we're going to end it. If you have a book and you'd like to sign it, we'll do a book signing here for about 10 minutes. So thank you very much. Let's get around.
Thank you.